Hi, I'm Jeremy Roschelle. I work at Digital Promise, which is a nonprofit in the United States that focuses on the connections among software developers, researchers, and educators. And today I'll talk to you a little bit of policy perspective, but from a research perspective. I want to share just a little bit about my background before I get started. I'm a researcher and I lead a 30-person research unit at Digital Promise. And I'm also a fellow of the International Society of the Learning Sciences. I'm involved in a number of research activities like leading research hubs, but also policy activities. I've been a lead subject matter expert for the US Department of Education, which has an Office of Educational Technology. And I've been the PI, I am the PI, for some important R&D centers in the US around generative AI. I also have a lot of LinkedIn followers and citations and patents and those things. And at the bottom of my slides, you'll see my LinkedIn, how to find me on LinkedIn in case you want to connect. Here's what I'd like to talk with you today. And first, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to you in Japan. It's very exciting. And I imagine your beautiful country. And I'm very glad to be connected. So I'm going to assume that you've heard some talks before about generative AI. I'm not going to start by defining it or doing those things. But I want to give you a sense of a landscape. What's happening out there in the world of education and generative AI? How big is it? How diverse is it? I want to focus the body of the talk on some insights about policy, especially as occurring in the United States. And then towards the end, I want to come back to talk a little bit about research. Here we go. With regard to the landscape, this is a picture of the market in the United States produced by a firm called EdTech Insiders. And I don't expect that you can read all these little icons, but if you want to, you can go to the EdTech Insiders site to find them. What I did want to share is how many categories generative AI is influencing. And those are on the right. Instructional materials, it's changing the nature of assessment and how students get feedback, how teachers learn. And also, there are supports in real time for teachers as they teach. There's also social tools to help students collaborate and student support tools to help students with their academic life, not just the subjects, but the business of being a student. And plus, there's administrative applications for school leaders, logistics, like how to schedule the school buses, all kinds of systems applications. Generative AI is not one thing. It's being used in so many different products, and it's certainly not just the most famous chatbots. Let's talk about a few characteristics of generative AI. One thing that I think you've all seen is that this is not a technology that's first presented to school leaders and they decide, do I let it in or not? Rather, it's kind of arrived and everyone just started using it all at once. And as educators, we have had to figure out how to adapt. What do we do? And that's a different characteristic for a technology. I also think it's an infrastructure technology because it's not just one thing you do with it. Some people might think the one thing you do with it is for teachers to make lesson plans or for students to write essays. But as we looked at the previous slide, it's really empowering everything, and it's being used in so many different ways. Also, generative AI is interesting because it's forcing us to change not only how we accomplish educational goals, but what are the goals in the first place? For example, if generative AI can write essays or do mathematics well, why are we teaching students those exact same skills? So it makes us question, what are the skills that education is trying to develop in people? And we have to take that on. There's also a tendency to think of AI as text, but it's not just text. It's also images, it's voice, it's video, and it's not just chatbots. And finally, I want to close by saying that this is a characteristic of generative AI, unfortunately, that there are real risks. There are safety risks for students. There are problems in the United States, for example, of cyberbullying. There are issues of fairness to students, of academic honesty or cheating, and there's issues of data security and privacy. And so we have to deal with these very real risks. I've shared talks like this with people in the US, and I like to emphasize that while there's risks and while this is new, there's a lot we can build on because the education sector is prepared. It's done work. One thing I've noticed is there's a really strong vision. And I know Japan has a great vision for where it wants its schools and its universities to go. And we always need to put the vision in front of the technology, not let the technology tell us what to do. So a strength is we have a vision. We know what we want education to be. Also, especially as a result of the pandemic, there's more professionalism in schools around information technology. And so there are people who are professionals who are ready to work on this. We've also built up some laws and guardrails, guidelines over years that we can build on. In the US and elsewhere, there are nonprofits. Internationally, you might look to OECD, to UNESCO, and to others for advice. And the advice is pretty much similar, no matter which one of these you look at. I also like to point out that AI is not new in terms of research. There's a 50-year-old research community that has studied AI in education, and so that's a resource. And lastly, when I talk to students and teachers, they're kind of wise because they experienced that social media had some good things, but also some bad things. And they know to be more careful this time around, that AI both will have promise, but it will also have risks. And we have all these strengths and we have work to do. Okay, so I'm going to dive into the policy part of this talk. And I had the honor of supporting our U.S. Department of Education as they worked on these 3 reports. And I'll talk a little bit about a key lesson from each one. The first one was very general. What is the future of teaching and learning with AI? The next one was more for developers. And the third one is for educational leaders. In addition, on the right, I put a picture of the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, which I think is a very nice White House publication, which is very readable and a good place to start if you want to think, what are the 4 or 5 most important issues with generative AI? What do we have to worry about? And many educators in the United States found the Bill of Rights really useful. So let me share a key idea from each of these reports with you. First, this is sort of an image that traveled around the world. It's a metaphor, and it's proven very useful to people as they think about what's the role we want for generative AI. And the idea is to think about an e-bike. One of those bicycles, when you pedal it, you get an assist from the battery and from the electricity. And it makes it easier to pedal the bicycle and you can go further. And if you have a big hill to go up, the hill isn't so steep. So what the statement says is we envision a technology-enhanced future that's more like an electric bike and less like a robot vacuum. On the electric bike, the human is fully aware and in control, but their burden is less, and their effort is multiplied by technology enhancement. So we imagine teachers and students driving that bicycle, deciding where they want to go and how fast. And so here you have the student driving across the pages of the book. This next image is from the developer's guide. For AI to be safe in education, we need cooperation of the developers with researchers, with policymakers, with teachers. And to develop this report, we had big listening sessions where we invited the public to come and talk to us about their fears and what they thought would work. And from that, we got this blue bubble to the right. The shared value that everyone wants to work on together is trust. Everyone wants there to be trust between these different groups, between developers, teachers, researchers, etc. So the question is, we want trust, And we want transparency, that is disclosure of how AI is being used. How do we get there? What this diagram says is we need to start with a commitment to design specifically for educational goals, and not just to take technologies that were developed for the general public or for business or for other uses and figure out if those technologies are good for education. We know enough now from everything that's happened in ed tech, we have to start with educational problems and designs that specifically address them. Then these three bubbles in the middle are three big processes, each of which in the United States has laws behind it. And I just want to walk you through those three. And the point of this was to say, yes, there may be new laws that are needed down the road, but we can start building trust today based on laws and processes and knowledge that already exists. We don't have to wait for new laws. We can start now. So these are three areas where we can start. One is the United States and many other countries have started requiring evidence before you start using technology in a broad way in schools. Does it really help students learn? Does it help teachers teach? Is there evidence that for the rationale, for the reason for using the technology, is that sound? And also, is there evidence the impact is positive? And we want this to continue in an age of AI. We want evidence to be part of the conversation. Therefore, companies working in this space have to work with researchers and educators to produce the evidence that what they're doing actually makes a positive impact. Second, we want to use technology to advance social goals in the society. And these might differ in Japan or the United States or another country. But in the United States, we want to advance equity. For example, many people are looking at how generative AI can be good for students who have a disability. Generative AI can translate materials into a different format. For a student who can't see something, generative AI can help describe the visual, or it can make visuals for students who need certain kinds of visuals. So we want to look positively about how generative AI can help with our equity goals to give everyone the best opportunity to learn. At the same time, we have to protect against discrimination by algorithms. And that can be accomplished in the United States under civil rights laws. These are laws which protect certain groups of students, and there can be lawsuits and remedies if someone breaks one of these rights. For example, if a test is biased towards one group versus the other, that can be addressed. It has to be addressed. So we have laws that protect civil rights and then advance equity, and that can address algorithmic discrimination. Finally, there's this area of safety and security. And that area includes, well, are we sure that this product is not going to lead to cyberbullying? Will it protect student data privacy? If it collects student data, will that data be secure? Is it safe? And so the argument in this policy document is we need to start with designing for education. And these are three big things we need to do in order to build trust. And that everyone needs to have a role in doing these together. And let me talk now just about the guide for educational leaders. What should educational leaders be doing in an age of generative AI? And so the US Department of Education produced a guide. It had actually 10 modules. By the way, you can read all these guides online. They're all available. These were the three priorities that the US Department of Education landed on. The first one is people have to understand and know how to evaluate and use AI. That's what we call AI literacy. For AI to be safe in society, you can't just rely on the expert to say it's safe. We have to build up the students, the parents, the educators' decision-making capability to look at a technology, understand it, decide if it makes sense to use it, and whether it's safe. So that's AI literacy. And actually, just a day or two ago, the US Congress produced a congressional report on AI for all topics, not just education. But we are very pleased to see it has a section encouraging AI literacy in education. And so that was great. Secondly, in the US, probably in Japan as well, there are honesty policies for students and for teachers. And those are often for an era, for a time that's before generative AI. So something schools and universities need to do now is change those policies so that they address issues like cheating and how you want students to behave or not behave with this technology. And the third, The third big idea is that traditional educational technologies, well, schools could evaluate them and then make a decision at one point in time. Do we adopt this technology and use it into our school? We let it in, or no, we don't let it in. We don't want that technology. But what people are realizing with generative AI is it keeps changing. It keeps upgrading. And it's a little bit hard to know exactly what it's capable of. And so therefore, what might happen down the road. And therefore, there's a need for schools and universities to establish risk management processes, not just a one-time, I'm going to evaluate this and say yes or no, but rather how to manage the risks in an ongoing way. And that's pretty challenging, I'll say, for schools and universities. It'll take time, but it's really the only path to managing the technology well, is there has to be new processes for looking at the risks on an ongoing way, measuring them, managing them, mapping them out, and governing schools with these technologies in place. Okay, I think that's the three main policy ideas I want to share. Of course, there's lots more in those publications. And also in the United States, we have 50 states, and education in the United States is really not run by the federal government. It's run by the states. So far, half the states have produced their own guidance, including Puerto Rico, states like Connecticut, many others. Also, school districts are producing guidance. So if you're looking for policy, there is so much available right now coming from the United States about how different governing bodies, how do they want to address AI in their educational setting. There's also this EdSafe AI Alliance. I sit on the leadership council for it, and it has a framework for evaluating AI. And it's a good place to look also for policy guidance and also keep track of what's going on. And so I'd encourage you, if you're interested in these issues, to look up the EdSafe AI Alliance. You can easily find it on the internet. Okay, in the final part of my talk, I'm just going to have two slides about research. One is people often ask me, how do you tell good research about generative AI from not so good research? And that's really tricky because there's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of research papers being written very quickly, and they make vast claims about research, about AI being good for this or bad for that. And you have to be really careful right now. There's this 50-year history of research about generative AI, but there's also very new research that you need to evaluate carefully, to be honestly. So here's some of the things I look for when I read a research paper, and I just want to share them with you. First of all, are they just like testing like, oh, I think this thing might be good for education? Or are there actual scientific theories being used to inform the design? For example, theories about how students learn, or theories about student motivation, or theories about how to best teach chemistry or best teach physics. Are there real theories here, or are people just trying things? Well, I prefer the papers with theories. Secondly, is there some contrast that you believe in between the AI use and the other condition, like what happened before? And sometimes we're seeing papers where the other condition is not believable. It's a bad condition. No one would put students in that condition. And therefore, the whole study isn't that meaningful because they really didn't think through what the other condition is. Is the study long enough? Is it in a school or learning setting that's realistic, that you believe in? And how is learning being measured? Do you believe in the outcome measure, or is the outcome measure, in other words, what students gained? Do you believe in the measurement of that? That's really important. Also, what kind of research is it? Did they do a randomized trial? Well, that's a very strong research design. Is it a correlation, like more use gets more gain? And sometimes you see just like, do users like it? Is it a likability study? Do users accept it? And that's quite weak. Also, we're very concerned, because we care about equity, with did they analyze which students it worked for and which it didn't, or only say on average it works? For example, I'm doing a study right now with mathematics learners. And in the United States, we have some mathematics learners that are very far behind the grade they're supposed to be in. And we have some that are close. And we find different approaches and different products might work better for the students who are far behind, and other ones might work better for the students who are close. So we're looking for who it works, not just does it work on average. Does the paper discuss limitations? Does it talk about ethics? Does it tell you what the risks are? And finally, when you look at this paper and you're trying to connect it to your school or your university, is it reasonable to connect those two things, or are they just so different? And I would just say there's a lot of research that sounds like magic, or it sounds like hype. Just be careful. And if you're uncertain, find a friendly researcher. I know you have great researchers in Japan, and ask them to read the paper and give you their thoughts. Finally, I just want to share a little bit about my project that I'm excited about. It's using generative AI for reading, and it's specifically helping learners who at home, they don't necessarily speak English. And so they're learning English and learning to read at the same time. And this is a very challenging problem. It's for students in grades 1 to 3. It's using a theory base called the science of reading. And what we're doing is we're building on a commercial product called Amira. And what Amira does is a student reads a book out loud. They read the words, and it listens to them. The AI listens to the student as they read. And if they have difficulties with a letter, a part of a word, a sound, a whole word, putting words together, then it can notice that and offer them interventions, strategies, ways they can improve. And so what we're trying to do is specifically work on this to help English learners. And we have 5 years, we have a center with lots of scientists, and we're just very excited about this because reading is such a fundamental challenge. And the only way you read is by practicing, and enabling generative AI to help a student do good practice of reading would be incredibly useful. So this is my project. And if you're particularly interested in this project, I'd love to talk to you. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. So I hope it's been very helpful to you, that I've shared something about the context, how many ways AI is being used in the United States, that we've shared something about the policy documents that are being generated to guide that use of AI, and that I've shared something about research and how research can be a valuable part of the process. As you go on your own journey, you're going to be on a journey for many years, I expect, to really find the best uses of generative AI and also keep students safe. So here's how you can follow up with me. Here's my email address if you want to write to me. And I actually really like LinkedIn as a way to connect. So that would be terrific too. If you want to follow me or write to me on LinkedIn, it's pretty easy to find my name there. And if you want to stay connected to Digital Promise, the nonprofit that I work on, one thing you could do is sign up for our research newsletter, which there's a URL for right there. And any way you want to do it, I'd love to stay in touch. I really like talking to people around the world and learning from a global community. And I just find different countries and different people make advances, and we can all learn from each other. So I really hope you do stay in touch. So I hope this was useful talk, and I hope to meet you in person someday in the future. Thank you.